YouTube, another video. This time I'm going to be cleaning out the Graco ProX17. This is a little bit different than my video about cleaning out the Magnum X5. And this one's a little bit different in the fact that it has a manifold filter down here. And I'm going to put the cleaning of the gun filter in here too. I have it all in one video. But let's get right into it. Alright guys, the first step here is to get some, I like to use hot water. Got about 5 gallons of hot water and then a waste bucket. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take whatever you've been spraying, take your intake, put it in the hot water, and take your prime tube, get it all over everything of course, and put that in your waste bucket. Now I already have the pressure off of it, so it's on prime right now. What I like to do is make sure I don't have the baffle on the end of this thing. I had to put a new tube on here because I had a bit of an accident at a job. You can check that video out in the card. But what I'm going to do here is it's plugged in. I have the pressure on fairly low. It's on prime. I'm just going to hit the on switch until I get some watery paint coming through. So here comes some noise. Maybe. Okay. So now that we got the paint out of the pump, or for the most part it's out of the pump, move your prime tube back into where you're taking your intake in here and run it on prime for a little bit. It's a lot better when I have that baffle on there, but I haven't put it on yet. Okay guys. Now that we have the paint out of the pump, we're going to get the paint out of the hose. So I pull the tip out, switch it to spray, and then I toggle the on switch, and I always have the handle pulled so that you don't build up any pressure. So pull the trigger, hit on, get the paint to come out until you end up with some watery paint. Okay, now when I shut off the power, I always have the trigger pulled so that you don't build up any pressure. That way you never have any big surprises. But now I have mostly watery paint coming out of this thing. And the idea is to try and keep this water as clean as you can and dump all the waste into here. But I'm going to continue here for a second and get some more of this paint out, and then I'll switch to spraying in here. Alright guys, now that we got paint out of the hose on the gun, we are going to now cycle some of this cleaner water through both the hose and through the prime, through the pump. Alright guys, the next step here is going to be checking the filters. There's 3 filters on here. There's one on the intake tube, there's one in the manifold right here, right behind where the hose connects, and then there's one in the gun itself, so let's get to that. So here's the intake screen. It's actually fairly clean, so I don't think I'm going to mess with that too much. Now let's take out that manifold filter. Okay, the manifold filter is right here, right behind this. This is where the hose connects, and then this is what houses your manifold filter. So I'll pop that off. Okay, you can kind of see here that I destroyed my manifold filter by leaving it in there too long. Got paint dried on it, and it's stuck in there, so removing it was pretty tough and I kind of destroyed it. But for the rest of this video, it won't be important to have this in here. In fact, you'd take this out for this next step anyway, so I'm just going to replace this later on. So for the last filter then, this is the gun. Take the guard off, and you should be able to just turn this off, and this is where the last filter is, which is in your gun. We'll see what this thing looks like. Could be kind of rough. That's not too bad. So there you have your gun filter, and obviously it had black paint in it. You can take this, you can run it on a wire brush wheel for like on your grinder, or you can just use a regular wire brush and clean this up. Usually you can clean these up okay so that you can reuse them. So I'm going to clean up this filter and get it back in the gun. Actually, I'm not going to put it back in the gun. I'm just going to leave that filter out. The manifold filter is out. The only filter that's on there is on the intake, and I'm going to try and flush everything out of this thing. So I'll put this back. Okay, so now I have the gun back together. The manifold filter is out, and the filter in the gun is out. The intake tube filter is still on, and I'm going to try and flush any of the particles and stuff out of this with the tip out into the bucket here. So here we go. Okay, now we should have most of those chunks and stuff like that that were in these housings and in the housing of the gun here. That should all be out. So now the next step would pretty much be cleaning this filter, cleaning the gun filter, cleaning your manifold filter, or getting a new one, replacing them, and then putting them back in the gun, and we'll get. Alright, now for the last step, I mentioned that I usually save the tip for the end, so there's a little bit of paint in here yet. You can put that back into the gun here. And I usually reverse it right away. Then with the sprayer on spray and the trigger pull, you toggle the on button. Sometimes it's best to keep it in the water so that you don't get that spray, but just turn it on with the trigger pull. Okay, now as you continuously have your finger on the trigger, I'll switch it to spray mode and back in the water and turn it on, and so now essentially you should have a clean tip now. Give it a little pressure. So now your tip should be clean. Your filter's back in your gun and in your manifold and your intake. So the final step here is just going to be running water through the system one more time and ditching anything that's in the hoses or the sprayer itself. So I'm going to do that right now. So I have it on prime. I have the waste tube in, or the prime tube in the waste. So now we have clean water in the pump. So now from the intake, and this is with your filters all back in, and the gun, you can take the tip back out. Pull the trigger into the waste bucket here and turn it on until you get clean water. Clean water coming through the whole thing. Everything should be clean, filters included. And then I'm just going to run this in this bucket here a little bit. Okay, now you can put your tip back in. You've got a clean paint sprayer. You can store it with water in it for at least a few days. Sometimes I go a week or two, depending on how much I'm going to use it. If it goes more than 2 weeks, I usually use some pump armor and run that through, at least get it through the pump and prime it through. And usually that saves you a bunch of headache with filters and stuff being in rough shape. But so there you go, you got a clean paint sprayer. appreciate you guys watching. I'd love it if you guys subscribed, leave a comment, and we'll see you in the next one.